The proof of this argument ends up being pretty straightforward, but it does give us a chance to talk about standard tactics and strategies for predicate logic proofs. The first thing to notice about the proof is that you have a premise that's an existential generalization. As I say, this is the main operator of line 1, and in line 2 you have a universal generalization, and of course our desired conclusion is an existential generalization. First tactic is very obvious, is when you have existential generalizations, you're going to want to use EI. As all tactics, it's not always going to be productive, but generally speaking, because of the way that implication rules work, we generally want to strip off the quantifiers in order to be able to use other rules like MP or DS. And so if you have generalizations, instantiate them. On the opposite side, if you want an existential generalization, then chances are you will find an instance and then use existential generalization. Similarly, if you want a universal generalization, chances are you're going to find an instance and then use universal generalization. And here, since what we want is just the existential generalization, then what we are probably looking for is to get something that looks like this, and then e.g. it. And then last standard tactic, because of the restrictions on EI, when you want to use both, or when you think you want to use both EI and UI, use EI first. And this is simply because of that restriction about instantial names having to be new to the proof so far when you're using EI. So just as a quick example, suppose we did not follow that tactic and we UI'd line 2 first, and then of course in anticipation of wanting to use modus ponens, we're going to want to instantiate with the individual A on line 1 so that we can use modus ponens, right? But because of that restriction on EI, line 4 is actually illegal. And for more on that, go back to the textbook on the explanation of EI and its restrictions, or check out that video that's posted into week 9 on EI restrictions. But what happens if we EI first? In this particular proof, there's just no individual constants at all so far, and so we have satisfied all the restrictions on EI. But this is the more important part of this tactic, is that UI has basically no restrictions. And this is because it's a universal quantifier that we're stripping off. Whereas with existential quantifiers, we need to be careful that our named individual still stays arbitrary, is still a Jane Doe, as I put it in the other video. But with universal quantifiers, when they're true of absolutely everything in the universe. And that includes even other individuals that we've already named, even if we name them using a pseudonym. So that means we are safe here. Let me clean that up a little bit. Instantiating from a universal quantifier. This is the thing. This is actually very different reasoning. I know it just looks like we swapped some lines here, but as a result, the reasoning process is actually very different. And now we are able to use modus ponens. And of course, the rest of the proof is trying to get that instance. We have HA. Oh. And excuse me there. And we have HA at line 5, simp. And then now we've got our two halves of the conjunction, and so we conj them. 3, 6 conj. And we EG that sentence. And we're done, and we're all legal.